Typically, the new investor is terrified of making that first hire. And I get it, it's scary, it's a huge jump. So today, I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know about hiring that very first cold caller. And if you are new to the channel, my name's Justin You're. I'm a real estate investor and entrepreneur here in Las Vegas. I've made hundreds of videos teaching people about real estate, and the goal of this channel is to help you grow your money and mindset. Also, if you wanna see more personal content, follow me on Instagram at Justin You're. First things first, I wanna talk about what cold calling even is and why it's important before I talk about when to hire a cold caller and how to hire one. So in terms of real estate investing and wholesaling, all cold calling really is picking up the phone, dialing a homeowner, and calling them to see if they want to sell their home. That's all it is. You're basically calling a stranger, and that's why they call it a cold call. It's cold because you don't know the person. It's not warm. It's not like you're calling your mom or your dad. It's a stranger that you don't know, and they probably don't want to get called from you. So that's why it's cold. And cold calling can be a great way to find deals. Now, you can either be doing it yourself, which I suspect you already are, or you can hire it out to someone else to cold call for you. Now, I'm not here to tell you exactly how to run your business, but just from my experience and from my opinion, I don't think you should hire a cold caller right out the bat, like not right out the gate, not right away, unless you maybe have a full-time job and you don't have the time capacity to make these cold calls yourself. And the reason why I say that is because I truly think that you should get some type of experience cold calling yourself first, so that when you hire that first cold caller, you kind of understand what a good cold caller is, what a bad cold caller is. You understand what you need to be asking these sellers to get deals. So I always suggest for people to start cold calling themselves first. However, I'm not recommending for them to do it for like a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years themselves. Hopefully, if you're cold calling yourself, you're actually finding deals, maybe 1 or 2 so far. Now, you might be thinking at this stage, okay, should I hire my cold caller now or should I wait? And the real answer is it depends. Do you fully have a grasp on cold calling and what it takes to be a good cold caller? If so, and if you think you have the capacity to pay someone consistently, and you trust that if you hire the cold caller and you train them right, or you have someone else train them right, that you can continue to find these deals, then hire one. However, if you're at the stage where you're still not sure and you don't know how to find deals yourself that well yet, I would kind of shy away from hiring your first cold caller. That's, again, my opinion. But if you have a very serious time constraint, like you have a full-time job and you have a family, and you don't want to finish your full-time job and then after your job just go cold call away and never see your family, like, I get it. That's a tough position to be in. If you're in that position and you can afford a cold caller, I say do it. Yes, it might be a little bit harder to understand the intricacies of cold calling and how to train someone, but there are ways around that, and I'll kind of get into that later. And the reason why someone should even be thinking about getting a cold caller in the first place is to scale and to kind of take their time away from the business. So this isn't for everyone, because I've seen very successful business owners in real estate investing who have crushed it doing all the cold calling themselves, and they might still actually like cold calling. So they're doing the cold calling, they're meeting the sellers out at the properties, they're closing deals. And for some people, not me, but they love it. Like, they freaking love it. And for some reason, they just keep going at it. And they don't really want to scale. Like, they enjoy being in the business and closing deals, talking to sellers all the time. Now, if that's you, you might not know this yet, but if that's you, then there's nothing wrong with being in that part of the business for a while, or maybe for a long time if you really, really love it. But I suspect you might hate it already if you've started to cold call. It's a tough business to actually cold call these sellers, and a lot of people are mean. They'll tell you F you, they'll say never call again, they'll say I'm gonna sue you. Like, they'll say a lot of weird stuff. But if your goal is to truly scale, and scale in the sense of trying to automate your business and fully stepping away from it so that the business continues to generate income on its own without your help, then you really want to step away from the cold calling as soon as humanly possible. However, I'm not saying to skip out on the work that it takes to do the cold calls yourself for a month, 2 months, 3 months, so that you get a feel of how cold calling is and what it takes to be good at it and successful at it, so that you can teach it correctly. I'm not saying to skip that part. What I am saying is that if you want to scale your business, you have to be working on the big picture items. You can't be in the trenches doing the hard stuff. And this is especially true for low dollar activities like cold calling. It's a low dollar activity because you can easily train it to someone, and it's just kind of a lot of repetition. It's not like a high skill where you need to understand how to code something, or it's not like being a surgeon being able to perform a surgery on someone. Like, they're very high skill things, high skill activities. Now, this is a very low skill activity, so you can train it easily, and your time is your money. So if all your time is being spent on the low dollar activity, you wanna find a way to up it and get out of it to be spending time on high dollar activities. So that's what cold calling is and why you should get one. Now, the next question is, when should you hire an actual cold caller? Now, when you should hire an actual cold caller, it depends on a lot of things. One is your just general situation. I kind of touched on it earlier, but if this is your full-time gig, so if you're doing real estate investing or wholesaling full-time, then I would suggest for you to do as many of the cold calls as you possibly can until you get a good feel of getting deals. And maybe you've gotten a couple deals under your belt and you have an understanding of how many calls it takes to get a deal. Because now you understand the sales process, you understand the marketing behind it, like how many cold calls you have to make, you understand selling to the person, you understand what kind of data you need to use to get these numbers and stuff. So like, get a good understanding of how it works first. And in my opinion, if this is your full-time thing, I say to do the cold calls for a couple months, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. It kind of depends on your learning speed, to be honest, and it depends on how many deals you get. So if you get 0 deals, I wouldn't hire a cold caller just yet unless you have a very high risk tolerance. Now, everyone's different, like I said. My risk tolerance is kind of high, but it's not that high. Like if I was starting a new business venture, unless I was very confident in what I was doing, like maybe with the knowledge I know now, I would get a cold caller right off the bat. But before, when I was just starting and I didn't have this knowledge that I have now, I wouldn't have. And I wouldn't suggest for you to do that either. I'd actually suggest for you to learn the game of cold calling for a couple months. Just understand it fully, hopefully get a deal, maybe 2 deals, maybe 3, and then that's when I say you should get your first cold caller. And from that point, that's when I think you should get your first cold caller. Now that's for the person who's in real estate investing and wholesaling full time. For the other side of the spectrum, for the people who have the W-2 jobs, or if you're working a part-time job, here's kind of what I recommend. One, for the W-2 jobs, or maybe if you're just working full time, whether it's one job or multiple jobs, if you're in kind of that category, I would say it's not that bad of an idea to hire cold callers right away. It might be terrifying for you because you're earning an income in another job and you're spending a good chunk of it for a cold caller. Again, it depends on your confidence level in the process. And if you can really stick to the process and really focus on trying to improve every single day, whether that's trying to get better data, trying to get better at your sales ability, trying to train the cold callers better, which if you're hiring, that's your main focus. You wanna be able to train the cold callers really well. But that being said, if you have never done it yourself, it's hard to train a cold caller. There are other options out there, and again, I'm gonna touch on that a little bit later in the video, but here's what I suggest. So if you're fully confident in the process, go ahead and hire that first cold caller if you have the full-time job. However, if you're not fully confident yet, and that's okay if you're not, I wouldn't just throw your cash at a cold caller. I would try to do a little bit of the cold calls myself, whether it's after work, before work, whatever you decide to do, like make a little bit of time every single day, depending on your schedule. Like maybe if you don't have a family, maybe grind it away, like it's up to you. If you have a family or if you have a girlfriend or if you wanna have more balanced lifestyle, then choose to do that. But you always have a little bit of time in every single day to do something that's conducive or productive to help you reach your goals. Now I say this because a lot of people are doing a lot of things every single day that are not productive in terms of attaining their goals. And you're gonna find so much free time if you just kind of analyze your schedule and see what you do after work. So maybe you're working that 9 to 5, you're working 40 hours a week. Really look at your schedule, even on the weekdays, and see, okay, what do you do in the mornings? What do you do in the evenings? Like, are you wasting time scrolling on Instagram or on TikTok, watching YouTube videos that are not helpful or conducive to your goals? Like, if you are, try as best as you can to identify those, cut them out of your schedule, and spend that time that you would have spent there on cold calling. Now, I suggest for you to do this so that you can kind of build that confidence up with cold calling, see how it works yourself, so that when you're actually ready to hire that cold caller, that you can actually train them. Now, everyone's ready at a different part, and in my opinion, no one is ever fully ready for their first hire, but you're gonna have to make it eventually if you do want to scale. Now, only one question remains, and it's how do you actually get a cold caller? So there are 2 main ways to get a cold caller. There is hiring one directly, and then there's also hiring a company who manages cold callers, like a call center. So you can use one of those, or you can go hiring directly. And I'm gonna explain the benefits and the cons of both. Now, if you're gonna hire directly, you can either hire someone virtual, so from a different country, probably a third world country because it's cheaper labor, or you can hire someone local to your market or in the US, but you're probably gonna be paying a higher price because of that every single hour. So What you can do is if you want to go the cheaper route and hire directly, all you got to do is there are websites out there. There's like Fiverr.com, there's onlinejobs.ph. I don't really know that many others, to be honest, but there's websites out there where you can hire services, virtual assistants they call it. And you can get a virtual assistant from somewhere, you can interview them, see if they're a right fit. But once you get one, the downside of hiring directly is that you have to do all the training yourself. You have to train them and you have to kind of manage them. So just because you hire someone to do something doesn't mean they're gonna do it. So if you hire someone to call every single day and you want them to make 2,000 calls a day or 2,000 dials, just because you hire them doesn't mean they're gonna do it. So your job, if you're hiring them directly, is to literally manage them and kind of babysit them to make sure they're actually getting their calls in, make sure they're saying the right things. So you might have something where you can have their voice recordings or the call recordings, so you can see how they interact with the actual sellers or the homeowners, and you have to train them. So like, there's a lot of your time still being spent, but instead of your time being spent on the cold calling yourself, you're just spending it on training the cold callers. So it's kind of still time intensive, although it still does help a lot because all your time isn't spent cold calling, it's now spent on helping them understand it. And once they get the hang of it, especially if they're a good cold caller, a good virtual assistant, then you can kind of step back a little bit away from the training and you can kind of go more so just maybe a little bit of management, making sure they're doing their calls, reviewing them every once in a while. But there's a downside to hiring directly. Now, the other direction you can go when you hire a cold caller is you can go through a cold calling company. Now, the big benefit with going through a cold calling company is that you don't have to do all that stuff. So like, you just hire the cold caller, you hire the company, they pick your cold caller for you. They might send like different voice recordings of how different cold callers sound. You get to choose one. They're the ones that get to train them, or I mean, everyone's different, every company's different, but the ones I've worked with, they train the cold callers. And instead, like, you kind of give them the script, you kind of give them feedback on what you like, and then they have managers for the cold callers to train the cold callers. And once they're trained, the managers are the ones to babysit them. So the managers are the ones to make sure they're performing correctly, they're making enough calls, they're saying the right things, and maybe every week or so you might get an update of your key performance indicators or KPIs, which is essentially like how many calls they made, how many people answered, how many bad numbers there were. Like, you have a lot of data to look at, and they'll often provide that data for you. Like I said, every cold calling company is different, but at least the ones I've worked with, they've done all that, and it's been amazing. Like, they paid for a dialer too, the dialing system, so that you can call as many numbers as humanly possible. So they've paid for that as well. Again, each one is different, each one has different services, but for the most part, if you're gonna go through a company, you're gonna spend a lot less time yourself trying to manage and train the cold callers. You hire directly, you're spending all that time. However, the downside of using a nice company like this, they're gonna charge you way more per hour. So if you're trying to hire a cold caller for like 40 hours a week, if you hire someone directly, at least right now at time of recording, you might be able to pay like $3 an hour, $5 an hour. When you go with a cold calling company, you might be paying something like $8 to $12 an hour. So it's a lot more, but it's a lot less of your time. So you kind of have to gauge what works for you, but those are the ways that I'd recommend it. I'm not gonna shout out any companies right now because I don't, like, this isn't like a sponsored video or anything. I'm just kind of giving you different options. You can hire directly or you can hire a company. The direction I've gone with a company in the past, but my situation's probably different than yours. Like, I had some money to spare, like from just investing and from saving up from jobs. You might be in a different position where you'd rather spend the time to either cold call yourself or train the cold callers until you get a little bit more deals coming in, more money coming in. Also, if you want help to grow your real estate business, whether you're brand new or if you already got deals under your belt, click the link in the description below, fill out the form, and then someone from my team will reach out to you. Peace.